Uncover Poirot's Secrets, where Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot reveals thrilling mysteries. In the glittering chaos of Ashford Manor's Gilded Mask ball, a scream pierces the night. Lady Evelyn Ashford lies dead, a gilded rose on her chest, its bloodied stem a silent accusation. Who wielded the deadly flower in a crowd of masked revelers? Was it her debt-ridden son Reginald, desperate to save his inheritance? His secretive wife Clara hiding her own grudge? Or perhaps Dr. Haverford, bound by a scandalous past? As Hercule Poirot steps into this closed circle of lies, every clue, the stopped clock, a stolen earring, a cryptic note, unravels a web of betrayal, a hidden child, and a chilling truth. Can you guess the killer before the final twist? Dive into a mystery where shadows bloom with secrets, and only Poirot's little gray cells can uncover the truth. Chapter 1. The Gilded Mask Ball. The grand ballroom of Ashford Manor glittered under the weight of 1,000 candles, their flames flickering in the crystal chandeliers like stars trapped in a gilded cage. It was the night of the annual Gilded Mask Ball, a tradition upheld by the Ashford family for 3 generations, where England's elite gathered to revel in anonymity behind ornate masks. The air was thick with the scent of roses, champagne, and secrets, as silk-clad figures swirled across the polished oak floor to the strains of a waltz. Beyond the tall windows, the Devonshire cliffs loomed, their jagged edges softened by the moonlight, while the sea below whispered restlessly against the rocks. Captain Arthur Hastings, recently returned from a tiresome journey to London, stood near the refreshment table, adjusting his ill-fitting mask, a garish creation of gold and peacock feathers. He felt out of place among the opulent crowd, his soldier's instincts bristling at the undercurrent of tension beneath the evening's polished veneer. The Ashfords, known for their wealth and impeccable taste, had outdone themselves this year. The ballroom was a masterpiece of decadence. Velvet drapes, marble busts, and a towering centerpiece of gilded roses that seemed to mock the austerity of the post-war years. At the heart of the gathering stood Lady Evelyn Ashford, the widowed matriarch of the estate, her silver hair crowned with a mask of filigreed gold that caught the light with every turn of her head. At 62, she retained a commanding beauty, her emerald gown clinging to a figure that defied time. She moved among her guests with the grace of a queen, her laughter bright, but her eyes sharp, as if cataloging every word and gesture. Hastings, who had met her only once before, noted the way she lingered near certain guests, a fleeting touch on a shoulder, a whispered word, before gliding onward. Beside her, her son, like shadows. His wife, Clara Ashford, stood apart, her delicate frame swathed in sapphire silk, her mask adorned with sapphires that glittered coldly. She sipped her champagne in silence, her gaze fixed on the dancers, as if searching for someone, or avoiding them. The other guests were no less striking. There was Dr. Simon Haverford, the family physician, whose gaunt face and nervous hands belied his reputation for calm competence. His mask, a plain bronze affair, seemed an afterthought, as if he cared little for the evening's festivities. Miss Beatrice Lyle, a young heiress and distant cousin of the Ashfords, flitted about in a gown of pale pink, her laughter too loud, her eyes too bright, as if masking some private sorrow. And then there was Major Ernest Whitlock, a retired military man with a booming voice and a mask of polished ebony, who seemed to know everyone and yet trust no one. Hastings, feeling the weight of the room's unspoken dramas, was about to retreat to a quieter corner, when a sharp cry pierced the air. The music faltered, the dancers froze, and all eyes turned toward the grand staircase at the far end of the ballroom. There, at the foot of the marble steps, lay Lady Evelyn Ashford, her gilded mask askew, her emerald gown pooling around her like spilled ink. A single perfect rose, gilded, like the centerpiece, rested on her chest, its petals glinting in the candlelight. Her eyes, wide and unseeing, stared upward, and a thin trickle of blood marred the flawless white of her throat. A gasp rippled through the crowd, followed by a scream from Beatrice Lyle, who clutched at Dr. Haverford's arm. Reginald Ashford pushed through the throng, his face pale beneath his silver mask. "Mother!" he cried, dropping to his knees beside her. Clara, his wife, stood rooted to the spot, her champagne flute trembling in her hand. Major Whitlock barked orders for the servants to clear the room, but the guests, frozen in shock, remained where they stood. Hastings, his heart pounding, knelt beside Reginald. "She's gone," he murmured, his fingers finding no pulse at Lady Evelyn's wrist. The wound at her throat was small, precise. A single thrust, expertly delivered. He glanced at the gilded rose, its stem unnaturally rigid, and noted the faint smear of blood on its thorns. A weapon, perhaps? Or a message? The ballroom, moments ago alive with music and laughter, now hummed with fear and suspicion. Guests whispered behind their masks, their eyes darting to one another, searching for guilt in every glance. Trenches, but this was different. This was cold, calculated, personal. The gilded rose, the mask, the precise wound. It all spoke of a mind as meticulous as it was ruthless. And yet, the ballroom was a closed circle. The manor's gates were locked, the cliffs impassable, the sea a barrier. Whoever had done this was still among them, hidden behind a mask of gold or silver or bronze. As the servants ushered the guests toward the drawing room, Hastings slipped away to the telephone in the library. He dialed a number he knew by heart, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "Poirot," he said when the familiar voice answered. "You must come at once. There's been a murder at Ashford Manor. A devilishly clever one, I fear." On the other end, Hercule Poirot, the diminutive Belgian detective with a penchant for order and a mind sharper than any blade, listened in silence. "Mon ami," he replied at last, his voice calm but laced with curiosity. "I shall arrive by the morning train. Keep your eyes open, Hastings, and your mind clear. The little gray cells, they must begin their work even now." As Hastings hung up, he glanced back toward the ballroom, where Lady Evelyn's body still lay, the gilded rose gleaming like a taunt. The night was far from over, and the shadows of the Gilded Mask ball had only begun to deepen. Chapter 2. The Shadow of the Crime. The first light of dawn crept over the Devonshire cliffs, casting a pale glow through the tall windows of Ashford Manor. The ballroom, so vibrant mere hours ago, now stood silent, its chandeliers dimmed, its polished floor marred by the chalk outline where Lady Evelyn Ashford's body had lain. The gilded rose, that curious and chilling detail, had been carefully removed by the local police, who had arrived in the small hours under the command of Inspector Grayson, a dour man with a penchant for hasty conclusions. The body itself had been taken to the manor's cold cellar, awaiting the coroner's examination. But the air of unease lingered, as if the very walls held their breath. Captain Arthur Hastings stood in the library, nursing a cup of strong tea that a trembling maid had brought him. Sleep had eluded him, his mind replaying the scene of Lady Evelyn's collapse, the glint of her gilded mask, the blood at her throat, the rose that seemed both ornament and accusation. He glanced at his watch, 7:45 a.m., and felt a surge of relief. Hercule Poirot's train would arrive soon, and with it, the hope of clarity in this tangled affair. The library, with its oak-paneled wall from Beatrice Lyle, or the sharp tones of Major Whitlock demanding answers. The door creaked open, and Clara Ashford entered, her sapphire gown replaced by a simple black dress that made her pale face appear almost ghostly. Her eyes, red-rimmed but dry, met Hastings's with a flicker of defiance. "Captain Hastings," she said, her voice low and controlled. "I trust you slept as poorly as I did." Hastings set down his cup, noting the faint tremble in her hands. "A sleepless night is to be expected, Mrs. Ashford, under such circumstances. My condolences for your loss." She gave a tight nod, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Thank you, but condolences will not undo what's been done, nor will they explain why my mother-in-law was murdered in her own home." She crossed to the window, her movements deliberate, as if each step were a calculated effort to maintain composure. "The police are fools. They think it's about money. Reginald's debts, my supposed resentment. But it's not so simple." Hastings raised an eyebrow, intrigued by her candor. "You believe there's more to it?" Clara turned, her gaze sharp. "Evelyn was not a woman who died by accident. That rose, that wound, it was personal. Someone hated her, Captain, and they wanted her to know it as she died." She paused, then added softly, "I saw her at 9:30 p.m., just before the waltz began. She was speaking to Dr. Haverford near the staircase. They seemed tense." Before Hastings could press further, a commotion at the manor's entrance announced the arrival of Hercule Poirot. He stepped into the library with his usual precision, his small frame immaculate in a tailored suit, his mustache waxed to perfection. His green eyes, sharp as cut glass, surveyed the room before settling on Hastings. "Mon ami," he said, his voice a soothing balm. "You have called me to a most intriguing puzzle. A murder at a masked ball. C'est magnifique, but also c'est tragique." Hastings recounted the night's events, the ball, the cry, the discovery of Lady Evelyn's body, the gilded rose and the peculiar wound. Poirot listened, his head tilted slightly, his fingers steepled before him. When Hastings mentioned the rose, Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A rose, gilded and bloodied? Mon Dieu, it is a clue that speaks of both beauty and malice. We must see this rose at once," Inspector Grayson, who had joined them, scoffed. "It's just a trinket, Mr. Poirot." Rose lay on a velvet cloth, its petals shimmering under the morning light. Poirot bent over it, his magnifying glass poised, his expression one of intense concentration. "Observe, Hastings," he murmured. "The stem is not natural. It is metal, hollowed, and sharp at the tip. A weapon, perhaps, disguised as ornament. And this blood, dry but not old. The rose was placed after the wound was made." Hastings frowned. "But why leave it there?" To taunt us? Poirot straightened, his eyes alight. To taunt, yes, but also to tell. The killer wishes us to know they are clever. This is not a crime of passion, but of calculation. Now, let us meet these guests, for it is in their words and silences that the truth will hide. In the drawing room, the suspects sat in uneasy silence. Reginald Ashford slumped in an armchair, his face haggard, a glass of brandy untouched before him. Clara stood by the fireplace, her posture rigid. Dr. Haverford fidgeted with his cufflinks, his gaunt face pale. Beatrice Lyle, her pink gown replaced by mourning black, clutched a handkerchief, her eyes darting nervously. Major Whitlock paced, his ebony mask now a memory, his military bearings strained by the weight of suspicion. Poirot addressed them with a bow, his voice calm but commanding. Mesdames et messieurs, a great tragedy has befallen this house. Lady Evelyn Ashford is dead, and one among you knows why. I, Hercule Poirot, will uncover the truth, not with haste, but with method. I ask for your cooperation and your honesty. A murmur passed through the room. Reginald spoke first, his voice hoarse. It wasn't me. I loved my mother. Yes, we argued about money, but I'd never... He broke off, his eyes flickering to Clara, who looked away. Dr. Haverford cleared his throat. I saw her at 9:30, as Clara mentioned. We discussed her health. She'd been feeling faint lately. I advised rest, but she insisted on hosting the ball. Beatrice's voice trembled. She was so kind to me. Always. Who could do this? Major Whitlock snorted. Someone with a grudge. Evelyn wasn't all sweetness. Plenty crossed her over the years. Poirot's gaze moved from one face to another, noting every twitch, every glance. Merci, he said at last. I shall speak with each of you in turn. For now, remain here. The truth, it is like the tide. It will come, no matter how you hide. As the guests dispersed under Grayson's watchful drawing room, where the atmosphere remained as taut as a violin string, the guests, still confined by Inspector Grayson's orders, sat in uneasy clusters, their faces a study in exhaustion and suspicion. The grandeur of the previous night's Gilded Mask ball felt like a distant memory, replaced by the grim reality of Lady Evelyn Ashford's murder. The gilded rose, now locked away in the parlor, seemed to loom in everyone's thoughts, a silent accusation that none could ignore. Hercule Poirot, having completed his examination of the crime scene, stood at the center of the drawing room, his small, immaculate figure commanding attention, despite his unassuming stature. His green eyes gleamed with quiet intensity, and his mustache, perfectly symmetrical, twitched slightly as he surveyed the assembled company. Captain Hastings stood near the fireplace, watching his friend with a mixture of admiration and anticipation. He knew that look. Poirot's little gray cells were already at work, piecing together the puzzle that had confounded the local police. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice clear and precise. I thank you for your patience. A crime has been committed, a life taken, and it is my duty, nay, my calling, to bring order to this chaos. Lady Evelyn Ashford was murdered last night, in this very house, during a moment of revelry. The method was precise, the motive obscured, but the truth, it is never far from the surface. I shall find it, with your assistance, Inspector Grayson. Standing by the door with a notepad in hand, snorted softly. With all due respect, Mr. Poirot, We've got a handle on this. Reginald Ashford's debts are motive enough. He was seen arguing with his mother at 9:15 p.m. near the ballroom entrance. We're waiting on the coroner's report, but I'd wager it was a quick job. Knife to the throat, Rose left as a flourish. Poirot's smile was polite but laced with disdain. Inspector, you see the surface, but not the depths. An argument, a debt, these are common things. But a gilded rose, a wound so precise, these are not the acts of a desperate man in a moment of passion. No, this is a mind that plans, that calculates. We must look beyond the obvious. He turned to the guests, his gaze lingering on each in turn. Reginald Ashford sat hunched, his eyes bloodshot, his fingers drumming nervously on the arm of his chair. Clara Ashford stood by the window, her black dress absorbing the light, her expression unreadable. Dr. Simon Haverford, pale and twitchy, adjusted his glasses. Haverford last saw Lady Evelyn at 9:45 p.m. when her body was discovered. Precision, if you please. The truth depends on it. Reginald spoke first, his voice rough. I was in the ballroom, dancing with Beatrice.
We'd just finished a waltz when the cry went up. I didn't see Mother after our discussion at 9:15. Beatrice nodded, her voice tremulous. That's right. Reggie, Mr. Ashford, was with me. We were near the orchestra, by the east wall. I didn't see Lady Evelyn after dinner. Clara's voice was cool, almost detached. I was on the terrace, alone, from about 9:20 onward. I needed air. The ballroom was stifling. I heard the scream and came back inside. Dr. Haverford cleared his throat, his hands clasped tightly.
As I said, I spoke to Lady Evelyn at 9:30, near the staircase. She seemed agitated, but she wouldn't say why. After that, I went to the refreshment table. Captain Hastings, you saw me there, didn't you?
Hastings nodded. Yes, around 9:35, I believe. You were pouring yourself a glass of punch. Major Whitlock's voice boomed.
I was in the card room, playing bridge with Lord and Lady Carver until 9:40. They'll vouch for me. Damned bad luck at cards, but I wasn't anywhere near the staircase.
Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable.
Merci. These alibis, they are the skeleton of our inquiry. But alibis, they can be as fragile as glass. I shall test them, one by one.
He paused, then added,
There is one more thing. The gilded rose. Does it hold meaning for any of you? A symbol, perhaps? A memory?
A heavy silence fell. Reginald's fingers stilled. Clara's gaze flickered to the floor. Beatrice's breath hitched, and Dr. Haverford's glasses slipped slightly down his nose. Major Whitlock's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Poirot's eyes narrowed, noting every reaction.
Very well,
he said softly.
The rose speaks, even if you do not.
He turned to Hastings.
Mon ami, accompany me to the staircase. I wish to see where Lady Evelyn fell. The scene of a crime, it is like a canvas. It tells a story to those who know how to read it. The grand staircase, its marble steps gleaming under the morning light, descended from the upper gallery to the ballroom floor. A faint chalk outline marked where Lady Evelyn's body had been found, and a small smear of blood, now dried, stained the third step from the bottom. Poirot knelt, his magnifying glass in hand, examining the step with the care of an artist. Confusion. The anonymity. But they left something behind. He pointed to a tiny scratch on the marble, barely visible. A mark, perhaps from a shoe or a weapon. We shall see. As they returned to the drawing room, a maid approached, her face pale. Mr. Poirot, sir, there's something you should know. I found this in the ballroom near the staircase after the police left. She held out a small, crumpled piece of paper, folded tightly. Poirot unfolded it with care, revealing a single line in elegant script. The rose blooms where shadows fall. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A clue, Hastings, and a challenge. The killer is not content to hide. They wish to play a game. But Hercule Poirot, he does not lose at games of the mind. The manor seemed to close in around them, its walls whispering of secrets yet to be uncovered. The circle of suspects tightened, and the shadow of the gilded rose grew ever darker. Chapter 4. The questions begin. The morning at Ashford Manor had grown heavy with the weight of suspicion, the air thick with unspoken accusations. The drawing room, where the guests remained under Inspector Grayson's watchful eye, buzzed with nervous energy, as if each person feared their secrets might spill forth unbidden. Hercule Poirot, undeterred by the tension, had taken up residence in the manor's study, a smaller room lined with mahogany shelves and dominated by a heavy oak desk. It was here, in this quiet enclave, that he began his interviews, summoning each suspect one by one to unravel the threads of the previous night's crime. Captain Arthur Hastings sat in a corner, a notebook open on his lap, though he found it difficult to keep up with Poirot's rapid-fire observations. The Belgian detective's methods were as meticulous as ever, his questions deceptively simple, his eyes missing nothing. The crumpled note found by the maid, the rose blooms where shadows fall, lay on the desk before him, its cryptic message a silent challenge. Poirot had already declared it significant, though he had not yet shared its full meaning, even with Hastings. The first to be called was Reginald Ashford, who entered with the air of a man carrying a burden too heavy for his shoulders. His face, unshaven and pale, bore the marks of a sleepless night, and his fingers fidgeted with the cuff of his shirt. Poirot gestured for him to sit, his expression one of polite curiosity. "Monsieur Ashford," he began, his voice smooth as velvet. "You loved your mother, yes? Yet the inspector tells me you argued with her at 9:15 p.m. Tell me, what was the nature of this disagreement?" Reginald's jaw tightened, but
This argument, it took place near the ballroom entrance, yes? Did anyone overhear? Reginald hesitated, his eyes flickering to the window. "I don't think so. It was loud in there. Music, laughter. We kept our voices low." Poirot made a small note in his pocketbook, his movements precise. "And the gilded rose, Monsieur Ashford. Does it hold any meaning for you? A family tradition, perhaps?" Reginald's brow furrowed. "No. Mother loved roses, but gilding them? That's not her style. It's ostentatious. She'd have called it vulgar." Poirot nodded, dismissing him with a wave. "Merci. You may go, but remain in the drawing room." Next came Clara Ashford, her black dress stark against the warm tones of the study. She sat with the poise of a statue, her hands folded in her lap, though Hastings noted a faint tremor in her fingers. Poirot's tone softened, but his eyes remained sharp. "Madame Ashford, you were on the terrace from 9:20 p.m., alone. A curious choice to step away from such a grand event. Why?" Clara's lips curved into a faint, bitter smile. "I needed solitude. The ball was Evelyn's domain, not mine. She thrived on it. I found it suffocating. I stepped outside to breathe, to think. And did you see anyone else on the terrace? Poirot asked, leaning forward slightly. No, it was empty. I heard the music, the voices, but I saw no one until the scream brought me back inside. Poirot's gaze lingered on her. You mentioned to Captain Hastings that Lady Evelyn's death was personal. Why do you believe this? Clara's eyes darkened. That rose, the way it was placed, it wasn't random. Someone wanted to make a point. Evelyn had enemies, Mr. Poirot. She was charming, but she could be ruthless. Ask Dr. Haverford about their conversation at 9:30. It wasn't just about her health. Poirot made another note, his expression unreadable. And the note, madame, the one that speaks of roses and shadows. Does it mean anything to you? Clara shook her head, but her fingers tightened in her lap. Nothing. It sounds like something from a novel, not reality. Dr. Simon Haverford was next, his gaunt frame seeming to shrink under Poirot's scrutiny. He adjusted his glasses repeatedly, a nervous tic that Hastings found distracting. Dr. Haverford, Poirot said, you spoke to Lady Evelyn at 9:30 p.m. near the staircase. She was agitated, you said. Why? Haverford cleared his throat, his voice thin. She'd been feeling faint for weeks, dizzy spells, fatigue. I urged her to rest, but she refused. Last night she seemed preoccupied, steepled. And the gilded rose, doctor. A medical man might notice its construction, metal, hollow, sharp. Could it have been the murder weapon? Haverford paled. I hadn't considered it. The wound was small, precise, likely from a thin blade. The rose's stem. It's possible, I suppose, but I didn't examine it closely. Beatrice Lyle followed, her eyes red from crying, though Hastings suspected some of her tears were for show. She twisted her handkerchief as she spoke, her voice trembling. I was with Reggie, Mr. Ashford, dancing. I didn't see Lady Evelyn after dinner. She was so kind to me, always. I can't imagine who'd do this. Poirot's tone was gentle but probing. Mademoiselle Lyle, you are a cousin of the Ashfords, yes? You stand to inherit, perhaps, if Reginald and Clara are out of the picture. Beatrice gasped, her hand flying to her chest. You can't think I loved Evelyn. I'd never hurt her. Major Ernest Whitlock was the last, his military bearing intact despite the strain in his eyes. I was playing bridge, as I said, he barked. Lord and Lady Carver can confirm it. I didn't see Evelyn after 9 p.m. As for the rose, it's nonsense, some theatrical flourish by a coward. Poirot thanked him and dismissed the group, turning to Hastings once they were alone. Mon ami, what do we have? Alibis that overlap, yet gaps remain. A letter unseen. A rose, not just a clue but a weapon. And this note. He tapped the cryptic message. It is a taunt, Hastings, but also a map. The shadows fall in this house, and we must find where they lead. As they stepped into the corridor, a maid's cry echoed from the upstairs gallery. Sir! Mr. Poirot, it's Lady Evelyn's room. Someone's been in there. Poirot's eyes narrowed, and he hurried up the staircase, Hastings close behind. The game, it seemed, was far from over. Chapter 5. The Red Herrings. The cry from the upstairs gallery sent a fresh wave of tension through Ashford Manor, as if the very walls were conspiring to deepen the mystery. Hercule Poirot, his small frame moving with surprising agility, led the way up the grand staircase, his polished shoes clicking on the marble steps. Captain Arthur Hastings followed, his heart racing, while Inspector Grayson trailed behind, grumbling about the interruption. The maid, a young woman named Elsie, stood trembling outside Lady Evelyn Ashford's private chambers, her eyes wide with fear. Mr. Poirot's chill of her absence. Poirot's gaze swept the room, noting the neatly made bed, the silver hairbrush on the vanity, and the desk where papers lay in slight disarray. Not the meticulous order one would expect from a woman of Lady Evelyn's fastidious nature. Précisément, Poirot murmured, his fingers brushing the edge of the desk. The disorder. It is subtle, but it speaks. Elsie, what is missing? The maid wrung her hands. Her journal, sir. Lady Evelyn kept a leather-bound book on her desk, always locked with a little gold key. She wrote in it every night. It's gone, and the key's not in its usual place, in that drawer there. Poirot opened the indicated drawer, revealing a velvet-lined compartment, empty save for a single pearl earring, its partner nowhere in sight. A journal, he said softly. And a key. Both vanished like our mysterious letter. This is no coincidence, Hastings. Inspector Grayson, hovering near the door, scoffed. A missing diary? Probably misplaced. We've got a clearer lead, Reginald Ashford. I've just learned from the butler that he was seen slipping into the library at 9:25 p.m., not dancing with Miss Lyle as he claimed. He's lying, and that's enough for me. Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of mild irritation. Inspector, you seize upon the obvious with such enthusiasm. A lie, yes, but a lie does not a murderer make. We must understand why Monsieur Ashford lied, and what he sought in the library. Hastings, peering over Poirot's shoulder, pointed to a faint scratch on the desk's surface, near the inkwell. Look here, Poirot. Another mark, like the one on the staircase. Could it be related? Poirot examined the scratch with his magnifying glass, his expression thoughtful. Perhaps, mon ami. A key, a blade, a careless moment. These marks, they are breadcrumbs in our labyrinth. But let us return to the drawing room. The suspects, they grow restless, and restlessness reveals much. Back in the drawing room, the atmosphere had soured further. Reginald Ashford stood by the fireplace, his face flushed as Grayson confronted him about his library visit. I wasn't hiding anything, Reginald snapped. I went to fetch a cigar from the library humidor. I was back in the ballroom by 9:30 dancing with Beatrice. Ask her. Beatrice Lyle, seated on a sofa, nodded vigorously, though her eyes darted nervously. He was with me, Inspector. I swear it. Grayson's eyes narrowed. Reginald's shoulders slumped. I didn't think it mattered. I was only gone a moment. And with Mother's death, my head's not been clear. Clara Ashford, standing by the window, let out a soft, derisive laugh. Your head's never clear, Reginald. That's why Evelyn was always cleaning up your messes. Reginald whirled on her, his voice sharp. And you're so perfect, Clara? Sneaking off to the terrace, avoiding everyone. What were you really doing out there? Clara's face hardened, but before she could retort, Dr. Simon Haverford interjected, his voice strained. Enough! We're all on edge, but bickering won't help. Mr. Poirot, Have you found anything useful, or are we just to sit here accusing each other?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Doctor, I find much, but I reveal little until the pieces align. Tell me, you mentioned Lady Evelyn's agitation over a letter. Did she say who sent it?" Haverford hesitated, his fingers adjusting his glasses. "No, she didn't. Only that it was unsettling. She burned it in the fireplace, I think. She mentioned wanting to be rid of it." Poirot's eyes flickered to the fireplace where ashes lay cold and undisturbed. "Burned, you say? Yet no one has checked the grate." "A careless oversight." Inspector Grayson flushed, dispatching a constable to examine the fireplace. Moments later, the constable returned with a charred fragment of paper, its edges curling, but a few words still legible. "Debt repaid. Shadows fall." Poirot's eyes gleamed as he read it, though he said nothing, tucking the fragment into his pocketbook. Major Ernest Whitlock, who had been pacing, stopped abruptly. "This is absurd. A bit of paper, a missing diary, what does it prove? Someone slipped a knife into Evelyn's throat during a crowded ball. Focus on that, not these theatrics." Poirot turned to him, his gaze piercing. "Major Whitlock, you are a man of action, yes. Yet you were content at cards while a murder occurred. Tell me, did you see anyone near the staircase before 9:45 p.m.? Whitlock's jaw tightened. "I told you I was in the card room. I didn't see Evelyn or anyone else near the stairs. I'm not your man, Poirot." "Perhaps not," Poirot said softly. "But someone is. And they are here, among us, wearing a mask of innocence." As the guests exchanged wary glances, Hastings felt a chill. Grayson's focus on Reginald seemed too neat, too convenient. A red herring, perhaps, designed to distract. Howled off the Devonshire cliffs. A reminder of the manor's isolation. The net was tightening. But the truth remained elusive, hidden in the shadows of the Gilded Mask. Chapter 6. A Clue in Detail. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Ashford Manor's polished floors, its light doing little to dispel the chill that had settled over the house. The guests, still confined to the drawing room under Inspector Grayson's increasingly impatient supervision, whispered among themselves, their voices a low hum of fear and frustration. Hercule Poirot, however, remained undeterred, his mind a whirl of connections as he paced the corridor outside Lady Evelyn Ashford's chamber. The missing journal, the charred letter fragment, and the cryptic note, "The rose blooms where shadows fall," were pieces of a puzzle that demanded precision to solve. Captain Arthur Hastings followed Poirot back into Lady Evelyn's room, where the air still carried the faint trace of lavender. The desk, with its subtle scratch and missing journal, drew Poirot's attention once more. He knelt beside it, his magnifying glass catching the light as he examined the scratch with meticulous care. "Observe, Hastings," he said, his voice low but vibrant with discovery. "This mark, it is not random. It is shallow, curved, as if made by the edge of a key, or perhaps a blade dragged in haste." Hastings frowned, peering at the desk. "A blade? You think the murder weapon was here in this room before the ball?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Not necessarily, mon ami. But this desk, it was disturbed after Lady Evelyn's death.
The journal was taken, the key removed. Someone sought to hide what she wrote, and this scratch, it is a whisper of their carelessness. He rose, his gaze sweeping the room, settling on the fireplace. The constable's discovery of the charred letter fragment had piqued his curiosity, and he now approached the grate, sifting through the ashes with a small silver tool from his pocket. "The letter, Doctor, Haverford mentioned," he murmured. "Burned," he said. "Yet this fragment, debt repaid, shadows fall. It matches the note found by the staircase. The killer is poetic, Hastings, but not infallible." Hastings, ever practical, scratched his head. "But why burn a letter and leave a note? It's as if they want us to find these clues." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Précisément. The killer plays a game before the cry that announced Lady Evelyn's death. A coincidence? No, Hastings. There are no coincidences in murder." They returned to the drawing room where the suspects sat in strained silence. Reginald Ashford stared into his brandy glass, his face a mask of guilt and exhaustion. Clara Ashford stood by the window, her posture rigid, her eyes fixed on the cliffs beyond. Dr. Simon Haverford fidgeted with his glasses, his nervous energy palpable. Beatrice Lyle, her tears now dry, clutched her handkerchief, her gaze darting between the others. Major Ernest Whitlock paced, his military stride clipped, as if movement could ward off suspicion. Poirot addressed them with his usual calm authority. "Mesdames et messieurs, a new detail has emerged. The clock in Lady Evelyn's room stopped at 9:42 p.m. last night. A small thing perhaps, but significant. Who among you was near her chamber at that time?" A ripple of unease passed through the room. Reginald spoke first, his voice defensive. "I told you. I was in the ballroom by then, dancing with Beatrice. I wasn't anywhere near Mother's room." Beatrice nodded, but her voice wavered. "Yes, we were together. I didn't see the clock, or anything upstairs." Clara's eyes narrowed slightly. "I was on the terrace, as I said. I didn't go upstairs all evening." Dr. Haverford adjusted his glasses, his hands trembling. "I was at the refreshment table after speaking with Lady Evelyn at 9:30. I didn't go near her room." Major Whitlock snorted. "I was in the card room, as I've said a dozen times." "This clock business is a distraction. Focus on the knife, or that damned rose." Poirot's gaze lingered on Whitlock, noting the slight flush in his cheeks. "The rose, Major, is indeed central. But the clock, it tells us something else. It tells us of a moment, a precise moment, when someone was in that room, and the journal, it is still missing. I wonder, who among you knows where it is?" The question hung in the air, unanswered. Inspector Grayson, growing impatient, interjected. "We've searched the manor top to bottom, Poirot. No journal, no key. Maybe it was burned, like that letter." Poirot shook his head. "No, Inspector. A journal is personal, cherished. It was taken for a reason, to hide a truth Lady Evelyn recorded, and truths, they have a way of surfacing. As the guests dispersed to their rooms under strict orders to remain in the earring, left in haste. We must ask the ladies, discreetly." They approached Clara first, finding her in the library, staring at a book she wasn't reading. Poirot held up the pearl earring, his voice gentle. "Madame Ashford, is this yours?" Clara's eyes widened briefly, then narrowed. "No, I wear sapphires as you saw last night. That's not mine." Beatrice, when questioned, gasped at the sight of the earring. "It's not mine either. I wear gold, always. Oh, Mr. Poirot, does this mean the killer was in her room?" Poirot said nothing, but his mind was racing. The clock, the earring, the scratch, the missing journal, these were not random. They were the fingerprints of a meticulous mind, one that planned but could not foresee every detail. As he and Hastings returned to the corridor, a faint sound caught Poirot's ear, a soft creak from the servants' staircase. He gestured for silence, his hand on Hastings' arm, and they crept toward the sound. At the foot of the narrow stairs, a small object glinted in the shadows. A gold key, its surface etched with a rose. Poirot picked it up, his smile triumphant. "The key to the journal, Hastings." The killer grows careless. Now, we are one step closer to the truth. But the shadows of Ashford Manor were deep, and the truth remained just out of reach, hidden behind a mask of lies. Chapter 7. More lies surface. The discovery of the gold key, etched with a delicate rose, sent a ripple of excitement through Hercule Poirot's meticulous mind. He held it aloft, its surface catching the dim light of the servants' staircase, and his green eyes gleamed with the thrill of progress. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing beside him, felt a surge of anticipation, though he knew better than to assume the key alone would unlock the mystery of Lady Evelyn Ashford's murder. The manor, with its labyrinthine corridors and hidden tensions, seemed to guard its secrets as fiercely as ever. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice low. "This key, it is the gate to Lady Evelyn's thoughts. Her journal, it holds the truth the killer fears. We must find it, and quickly, before it is destroyed." He slipped the key into his pocket, his movements precise, and gestured for Hastings to follow him back to the main corridor. The afternoon had deepened, the Devonshire sun casting slanted rays through the manor's tall windows, illuminating dust motes that danced like specters. The guests, still confined to the drawing room under Inspector Grayson's orders, were growing restless, their nerves frayed by hours of suspicion and scrutiny. Poirot, however, was undeterred, his focus sharpened by the new clue. Leather armchairs and a humidor sat prominently on a sideboard. Poirot's gaze swept the room, pausing at the humidor. "Monsieur Ashford claimed he came here for a cigar at 9:25 p.m., he said, opening the humidor to reveal a neatly arranged collection of cigars, undisturbed. Yet the dust on this lid is intact. No one has touched it recently. Another lie, Hastings." Hastings frowned, his mind struggling to keep pace. So Reginald wasn't here for a cigar. What was he doing then? Poirot's mustache twitched. That we shall discover. But first, the journal. He moved to the shelves, his fingers brushing the spines as if reading their secrets through touch. Near the fireplace he paused, his eyes narrowing at a slight irregularity. A book slightly askew, its leather binding glinting faintly. He pulled it free, revealing a hidden compartment in the shelf. Inside lay a small leather-bound journal, its cover embossed with a rose, its lock matching the gold key. "Voila," Poirot murmured, inserting the key. The lock clicked open, and he flipped through the pages, his expression growing grave. The journal was filled with Lady Evelyn's elegant script detailing her daily life, but the final entries were terse, Urgent. 1. Dated 2 days before the ball read. The letter arrived today. Threats. Veiled but clear. I know who you are, it said. I will not yield. Must. Speak to S.H. tonight. S.H., Hastings said, peering over Poirot's shoulder. Dr. Haverford, perhaps? Clara mentioned they spoke at 9:30. Perhaps, Poirot said, closing the journal. But we must tread carefully. This journal, it is a map to the killer's motive. Let us confront Dr. Haverford with it. They returned to the drawing room where the suspects sat in strained silence. Inspector Grayson, reviewing his notes, looked up as Poirot entered, the journal in hand. Found something, have you? He asked, his tone skeptical. A key, and what it unlocks, Poirot replied, holding up the journal. Dr. Haverford, a moment, if you please. The physician rose, his gaunt face paling further as he saw the journal. That's Lady Evelyn's, he stammered. Where did you find it? In the library, Poirot said, his voice deceptively mild. Hidden, as if someone wished it not to be found. You spoke with Lady Evelyn at 9:30 p.m., yes? She was agitated about a letter. This journal mentions a threatening letter and a need to speak with S.H. That is you, is it not? Haverford's hands shook as he adjusted. That's not true. We discussed her condition, nothing more. Reginald, roused from his brooding, snapped. You're hiding something, Haverford. Mother trusted you, and now she's dead. What did you say to her? Beatrice Lyle, her voice trembling, added, Oh, please, doctor. Haverford, if you know something, tell us. Evelyn was so good to me, she didn't deserve this. Major Whitlock, who had been silent, slammed his fist on the arm of his chair. Enough of this. You're all pointing fingers, but what about Clara? Sneaking off to the terrace, avoiding questions. Or Beatrice, always playing the innocent cousin. Someone here did it, and I'm tired of the games. Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. Mesdames et messieurs, the lies, they multiply like shadows. Dr. Haverford, you conceal something. Madame Ashford, you see more than you say. Monsieur Ashford, your alibi crumbles. And yet the truth is near. He held up the journal. This book, it speaks of a threat, a debt, a shadow. Who among you sent Lady Evelyn that letter? The room fell silent, the weight of Poirot's words pressing down. Then, unexpectedly, Beatrice stood, her face crumpling. I can't keep it in anymore, she whispered. I saw something last night near the staircase, just before the scream. It was a shadow moving quickly. I thought it was a servant, but now I'm not sure. I didn't say anything because I was afraid Poirot's eyes narrowed. A shadow, mademoiselle? Describe it. Beatrice swallowed hard. It was tall, cloaked in a dark cape, like the ones some guests wore with their masks. I couldn't see their face, but they were near the staircase at 9:40 p.m. I thought it was nothing. But now, Inspector Grayson seized on her words. A cloaked figure? That's new. We'll search the manor for that cape. Sounds like our killer. Poirot's smile was faint. Perhaps, Inspector. But a shadow is a slippery thing. Mademoiselle Lyle, why did you not speak of this sooner? Beatrice's eyes filled with tears. I was scared. I didn't want to be involved. Evelyn was so kind, and I
I didn't want to believe it was one of us. As Grayson dispatched constables to search for the cape, Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice low. Mon ami, the lies are unraveling, but they are also a trap. The journal, the shadow, the earring, these are threads, but the killer weaves a clever... Hercule Poirot stood by the fireplace, the leather-bound journal of Lady Evelyn Ashford in his hands, its pages a silent witness to the motives and fears that had led to her murder. The gold key, the charred letter fragment, and now Beatrice Lyle's trembling confession about a cloaked figure near the staircase had tightened the noose of suspicion. Yet the truth remained maddeningly elusive. Captain Arthur Hastings watched Poirot, noting the faint furrow in his friend's brow, a rare sign that even the great detective felt the complexity of this puzzle. Inspector Grayson, meanwhile, was in a flurry of activity, directing his constables to search the manor for the mysterious cape Beatrice had described. The room buzzed with tension, the guests' eyes darting between one another, each wondering who would crack under the pressure. Poirot set the journal on a side table, his movements deliberate, and addressed the group with a calm that belied the storm brewing within his mind. Mesdames et messieurs, he said, his voice clear and measured. We stand at a crossroads. Lies have been uncovered, alibis questioned, secrets glimpsed. Yet one among you holds the key to Lady Evelyn's death, not merely in metal, but in truth. I ask you now to speak before the net closes further. Reginald Ashford, his face haggard, gripped the arms of his chair. I've told you everything, Poirot. I lied about the cigar, yes. I was in the library, looking for a letter Mother mentioned. She said it was important, but I couldn't find it. That's all. Clara Ashford turned from the window, her eyes blazing. You were always sneaking about, Reginald, chasing her secrets. Did you find that letter? Did it push you too far? Reginald's voice rose, raw with emotion. How dare you, Clara? You hated her. You resented her control, her money, her hold over us. Don't pretend you're innocent. Clara's composure cracked, her voice trembling as she stepped forward. I resented her, yes. She treated me like a child, always meddling in our marriage, our lives. But I didn't kill her. I was on the terrace, alone, trying to escape her shadow. If you want to kill her, look at Haverford. He was the last to see her alive. Dr. Simon Haverford, his gaunt face ashen, stood abruptly, his glasses slipping down his nose. That's a lie. I told you. We spoke about her health. I cared for Evelyn. She was my patient, my friend. I'd never harm her. Beatrice Lyle, her tears flowing freely now, clutched her handkerchief and sobbed. Stop it, all of you. Evelyn was kind to me, like a mother. I can't bear this. Someone confess, please, and killed her. Find them. Poirot's eyes narrowed, his gaze moving from one face to another, noting every tremor, every glance. Major Whitlock, you speak of facts, but emotions. They are facts, too. They drive the hand that holds the blade. And now Mademoiselle Lyle has given us a shadow, a cloaked figure at 9:40 p.m. Let us explore this. He turned to Beatrice, his tone gentle but probing. Mademoiselle, you saw this figure near the staircase. Was there anything distinctive? A gesture? A sound? A detail of the cloak? Beatrice swallowed hard, her voice barely above a whisper. It was dark, heavy,
with a hood. I thought it was a guest, someone in costume, but there was a glint, like metal at their waist. I couldn't see more. It was so quick. Poirot nodded, his mind racing. A glint of metal. The rose, perhaps. Or another weapon. He paused, then addressed the group. The Journal of Lady Evelyn speaks of a threatening letter, a debt, a meeting with S.H. Doctor. Haverford, you deny knowledge of this letter. Yet Madame Ashford saw you argue with Lady Evelyn. Speak now. What passed between you? Haverford's hands shook, and he sank back into his chair, his voice breaking. It wasn't an argument. Not really. She was upset about the letter. She said it accused her of a betrayal, something from years ago. She asked me if I knew anything about it, but I didn't. I swear. I tried to calm her, but she pushed me away, said she'd handle it herself. Clara's voice cut through the room, sharp and accusing. You're lying, Simon! I saw her face. She was angry, frightened. What did you know? What did she suspect you of? Haverford's eyes filled with tears, and he buried his face in his hands. I can't keep it in anymore, he whispered. Evelyn and I. We were close, years ago, before she married. There was a scandal, hushed up, about a child, her child, given away. The letter mentioned it, threatened to expose it. She thought I'd told someone, but I hadn't. I loved her, even after all these years. The room fell silent, the weight of Haverford's confession settling like dust. Reginald's face went white, his voice a hoarse whisper. A child. Mother never spoke of. My God, is that what this is about? Beatrice gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. A child? Hem stained with a faint smear of blood. Found it, sir, he said to Grayson. In the servants' quarters, hidden in a laundry basket. Grayson's eyes lit up. That's it! The killer's cloak. We'll test that blood. It'll point us straight to the murderer. Poirot's smile was faint. Perhaps, Inspector. But the cloak, it is another thread, not the knot. The killer wishes us to chase shadows, but Hercule Poirot sees through them. Hastings, watching the scene unfold, felt a chill. Haverford's confession had shaken the group, revealing a hidden past that cast new light on Lady Evelyn's life. But was it the motive for her death, or another distraction? The cloak, the journal, the earring, all pointed to a killer who was both bold and meticulous, yet increasingly desperate. Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice low. Mon ami, the truth is near, but it is fragile. The killer watches us, and they fear the journal most of all. We must guard it, for it holds the final clue. Outside, the sea roared against the cliffs, its rhythm a stark contrast to the chaos within Ashford Manor. The emotional dam had broken, but the shadows of the Gilded Mask still concealed the killer's face. Chapter 9. The Trap. The discovery of the blood-stained cloak had sent a jolt through Ashford Manor, electrifying the already fraught atmosphere. The drawing room where the suspects remained under Inspector Grayson's watchful eye buzzed with whispered accusations and guarded glances. The cloak, now in the hands of the constables for examination, seemed to promise answers, yet Hercule Poirot remained skeptical, his green eyes narrowed as he surveyed the group. To him, the cloak was not the solution but a carefully placed lure, another thread in the killer's intricate web of deception. Captain Arthur Hastings stood by Poirot's side, clutching Lady Evelyn Ashford's journal, its leather cover warm in his hands. The revelations of Dr. Haverford's past with Lady Evelyn, a scandalous child given away, a threatening letter, had cracked the facade of civility among the guests, exposing raw nerves and hidden grudges. Yet Poirot, with his unerring instinct, sensed the killer was still maneuvering, watching, waiting for a misstep. Poirot clapped his hands sharply, drawing the room's attention. "Mesdames et messieurs," he said, his voice resonant with authority. "The hour grows late, and that the truth, it draws near." A cloak, a journal, a key, an earring. These are not mere objects, but signposts to a murderer's mind. Tonight, we shall lay a trap, and the guilty one, they will reveal themselves. Inspector Grayson, clutching his notebook, frowned. "A trap? We've got the cloak, Poirot, and blood on it. Once we test it, we'll have our man. Or woman. No need for theatrics." Poirot's mustache twitched with a faint smile. "Inspector, the blood. It may point to a victim, not a killer. The cloak was hidden too conveniently, no? The murderer is clever, but not infallible. They fear the journal, for it holds Lady Evelyn's final thoughts. Tonight, we shall use that fear." He held up the journal, its rose-embossed cover catching the fading light. "I shall place this journal in the library, unguarded, this evening. The killer, they will come for it, unable to resist. And we, mes amis, shall be waiting." Reginald Ashford's face darkened. "You're using Mother's journal as bait? That's ghoulish, Poirot." Clara Ashford, her voice icy, added, "And dangerous. What if the killer strikes again?" Dr. Simon Haverford, still shaken from his confession, adjusted his glasses nervously. "This is madness. Why not just arrest someone?" Reginald lied about the reaction. Reginald's anger, Clara's unease, Haverford's panic, Beatrice's fear, Whitlock's impatience. "The cloak, it is a distraction," he said softly. "But the journal, it is the heart. Lady Evelyn wrote of a threat, a betrayal, a child. Someone in this room knows more than they say. Tonight, we shall see who cannot resist the lure of truth." As the guests were dismissed to their rooms for the evening, under strict orders to remain there until dinner, Poirot and Hastings retreated to the library to prepare. The room was dim, lit only by a single lamp on the mahogany table. Poirot placed the journal prominently on the desk, its gold lock glinting, and adjusted its position with care. "We shall watch from the alcove, Hastings," he said, indicating a shadowed corner behind a heavy curtain. "The killer will come, drawn by fear or guilt. But we must be silent." Invisible Hastings, his nerves taut, nodded. "What if no one comes, Poirot? Or worse, what if they come armed?" Poirot's smile was serene. "Then we shall be ready, mon ami. The little gray cells, they are my weapon. But your courage, it is invaluable." The hours crept by, the manor settling into an uneasy quiet. The clock on the library mantel ticked toward midnight, its rhythm a stark contrast to the tension in the air. Hastings, crouched in the alcove, felt his legs cramp, but Poirot remained still as a statue, his eyes fixed on the journal through a gap in the curtain. At 12:17 a.m., a faint creak broke the silence, the library door easing open. A figure slipped inside, cloaked not in the dark cape of Beatrice's description, but in a dressing gown, their movements stealthy. Hastings held his breath as the figure approached the desk, their hand reaching for the journal.
The dim light caught their face, and Hastings stifled a gasp. It was Clara Ashford. Poirot's hand gripped Hastings' arm, signaling silence. Clara's fingers hesitated over the journal, her face a mask of conflict, fear, guilt, determination. Then with a swift motion she opened the desk drawer, not touching the journal but retrieving something small and glinting. A second pearl earring, the match to the one found earlier. Before she could retreat, Poirot stepped from the alcove, his voice calm but commanding. "Madame Ashford, the journal was not your goal, it seems. But the earring, c'est intéressant. Care to explain?" Clara froze, the earring clutched in her hand, her eyes wide with panic. I didn't kill her," she stammered. "This earring, it's mine. I lost it in Evelyn's room days ago when we argued. I was afraid you'd think it meant something."
"Believe me, I left the earring behind by accident. When you found the other, I panicked. I thought you'd suspect me," Hastings, stepping forward, frowned. "Why not tell us, Mrs. Ashford? Hiding it makes you look guilty." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "I know. I was scared. Evelyn's death, it's torn everything apart. I just wanted to protect myself." Poirot studied her, his expression unreadable. "The earring. It is a clue, but not to murder. Perhaps to motive. Return to your room, madame. We shall speak again." As Clara fled, Poirot turned to Hastings. "Mon ami, the trap has caught something, but not the killer. Not yet. The earring links Clara to Lady Evelyn's room, but her fear, it is genuine. The journal remains untouched. The killer is cautious, but they will act soon." Outside, the wind howled against the cliffs, a reminder of the manor's isolation. The trap had sprung, but the true prey remained hidden, lurking in the shadows of Ashford Manor. Chapter 10. The Reveal. The night at Ashford Manor had deepened, the oppressive silence broken only by the distant roar of the sea against the Devonshire cliffs. The library, where Hercule Poirot and Captain Arthur Hastings had laid their trap, remained a stage of shadows, the rose-embossed journal still untouched on the desk. Clara Ashford's tearful confession about the pearl earring had added another layer to the mystery. But Poirot's instincts told him the true killer was still circling, waiting for a moment of weakness. The tension in the manor was palpable, as if the very walls anticipated the final act of this deadly drama. Poirot, his green eyes sharp in the dim light, gathered the suspects in the drawing room once more, the journal tucked under his arm. The guests, Reginald Ashford, Clara Ashford, Dr. Simon Haverford, Beatrice Lyle, and Major Ernest Whitlock, sat in a semicircle, their faces a mixture of dread and exhaustion. Inspector Grayson stood by the door, his skepticism barely concealed, though he had grudgingly agreed to Poirot's request for this gathering. The blood-stained cloak, the stopped clock, the cryptic note, and now the journal had woven a complex tapestry, and Poirot was ready to unravel it. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice steady and commanding. "The time for games is over. A murderer walks among us, hidden behind a mask of innocence, but the little gray cells of Hercule Poirot have seen through the deception. Tonight, I shall reveal the truth of Lady Evelyn Ashford's death." A murmur rippled through the room. Reginald clenched his fists, his secret child. "But it is not the journal alone that points to the killer. It is the gilded rose, the stopped clock, the earring, the cloak, all threads in a web of calculation. Let us begin with the crime itself." He paced slowly, his words deliberate. Lady Evelyn was killed at 9:45 p.m. on the grand staircase during the Gilded Mask ball. A single precise wound to the throat, delivered with a blade hidden in the stem of a gilded rose. The rose was placed on her chest, a signature of intent. The clock in her room stopped at 9:42, suggesting someone was there moments before. A letter, burned but partially recovered, spoke of a debt repaid and shadows fall, matching a note found near the staircase. And then the cloak, blood-stained, hidden conveniently in the servants' quarters. Grayson interrupted, his voice gruff. The cloak's blood matches Lady Evelyn's, Poirot. We're testing it now, but it's clear. Someone wore it to kill her. Poirot's smile was faint. No, Inspector. The cloak is a red herring, placed to mislead. The blood, it is hers, yes, but smeared after the fact. The killer did not need a cloak. The ballroom was crowded, the masks hid identities. The murder was swift, unseen, in the chaos of the dance. He turned to the suspects. Let us examine the alibis. Monsieur Ashford, you lied about the library, claiming a cigar but searching for a letter. Madame Ashford, you were on the terrace, but your earring places you in Lady Evelyn's room days before, during an argument. Dr. Haverford, you spoke with her at 9:30, discussing a threatening letter about a past scandal. Mademoiselle Lyle, you saw a shadow near the staircase, a convenient tale. Major Whitlock, you were at cards, yet your impatience suggests a man with something to hide. Whitlock bristled. I've nothing to hide. I was with the Carvers, as I said. Poirot nodded. Oui, and they confirm it. But alibis, they are not enough. The motive lies in Lady Evelyn's past. A child given away. A secret that threatened to surface. The journal mentions a letter accusing her of betrayal, demanding a meeting with S.H. Dr. Haverford, you admitted your past with her, but you claim ignorance of the letter's sender. Haverford's voice cracked. I told you, I didn't send it. She suspected me, but I swore I hadn't betrayed her. Poirot's gaze shifted to Clara. Madame Ashford, you're her dearest hope, but also her greatest fear. Why? Beatrice's eyes widened, her handkerchief falling to the floor. I don't know what you mean. She was kind to me always. I loved her. Poirot stepped closer, his voice relentless. You loved her, yes, but you also knew the truth. The child, Beatrice. It was you. Lady Evelyn gave you up, raised you as a cousin to protect her reputation. The letter threatened to expose this, to ruin her legacy. You found it, read it, and confronted her at 9:30 p.m., not Dr. Haverford. The clock stopped when you entered her room searching for the letter. You took the journal, hid it, but left the earring, Clara's, stolen to cast suspicion. Beatrice's face crumpled, her voice a whisper. No, you're wrong. Poirot pressed on. You wore a cloak, not the one found but another discarded. You used the gilded rose, a symbol of her pride, to kill her on the staircase in a moment of chaos. The note, the rose blooms where shadows fall. It was your flourish, a taunt to those who underestimated you. Reginald leapt to his feet. Beatrice, that's absurd. She's family.
Poirot's gaze was unwavering. Family, oui, but also a threat. Lady Evelyn planned to reveal the truth, to make amends, but you could not bear the shame, the loss of your inheritance. You acted. With precision and cunning, Beatrice broke, sobbing. I didn't want to. She was going to tell everyone, ruin me. I begged her to keep it secret, but she wouldn't listen. I took the rose from the centerpiece, its stem sharp. It was so quick. Grayson, stunned, signaled his constables. Miss Lyle, you're under arrest. Poirot raised a hand. One moment, Inspector. Mademoiselle, you have confessed, and the truth, it is clear. The scratches, the earring, the stopped clock, all pointed to you. The shadow in the night. As Beatrice was led away, the room fell silent, the weight of the reveal settling over the group. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Reginald sank into his chair, and Haverford stared at the floor, lost in his own guilt. Whitlock shook his head, muttering about justice. Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice soft. Mon ami, the little gray cells, they do not fail. The truth, it blooms, even in the darkest shadows. Chapter 11. The Reflection. The drawing room of Ashford Manor, once a stage converged to unmask a killer who had hidden behind a facade of innocence. Hercule Poirot stood by the fireplace, his small frame radiating quiet authority, his green eyes softened by a contemplative glint. The journal of Lady Evelyn Ashford rested on the mantel, its secrets now laid bare. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated in an armchair, felt the weight of the case lift, though a lingering unease remained. The manor, with its opulent halls and shadowed corners, seemed to exhale, as if freed from the burden of its darkest secret. Poirot turned to the group, his voice calm but resonant. Mesdames et messieurs, the truth has been uncovered, and justice, it will follow. Lady Evelyn Ashford's death was not a random act, but a tragedy born of hidden wounds, secrets of a past that could not stay buried. The little gray cells, they have done their work, but it is not enough to solve a crime. We must understand it, lest it haunt us still. Reginald, his face etched with grief, spoke first, his voice hoarse. Beatrice, my own cousin. I never imagined she could do such a thing. Mother loved her, treated her like a daughter. Why, Poirot, why did it come to this? Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his deep reflection. Monsieur Ashford, the human heart, it is a complex thing. Mademoiselle Lyle was indeed loved, but she carried a burden. The knowledge that she was Lady Evelyn's child, given away to protect a reputation. When your mother planned to reveal this truth, to make amends, Beatrice saw only ruin. Her inheritance, her place in society, her very identity, all threatened. Fear and pride, they drove her hand. Clara, her eyes red but dry, stood by the window, her voice low. Evelyn was never easy to love, but I didn't wish her dead. Beatrice, I saw her fragility, but not this. I should have spoken up about the argument I overheard, about the earring. Could I have stopped it? Poirot shook his head gently. Madame, guilt is a heavy cloak, but you must not wear it. The earring, it was a misdirection, stolen by Beatrice to cast suspicion. Your silence,
It was born of fear, not complicity. The truth, it finds its way. Dr. Haverford, his gaunt face drawn, removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. I failed her, Poirot. Evelyn trusted me, and I kept her secret about the child, about Beatrice. If I'd told her I knew, the mind, it seeks order, and order reveals truth. The gilded rose, the stopped clock, the journal, they were not mere objects, but mirrors of a killer's soul. Beatrice, she wished to be seen as innocent, but her own precision betrayed her. Hastings, unable to remain silent, leaned forward. Poirot, how did you know it was Beatrice? The cloak, the alibis, they all pointed different ways. What clinched it? Poirot's smile was faint but warm. Mon ami, it was the journal, always the journal. Lady Evelyn wrote of her dearest hope and greatest fear. Beatrice, her hidden daughter. The stopped clock at 9:42 p.m. placed someone in her room. And Beatrice's story of a shadow was too convenient, a tale to shift blame. The earring, stolen from Clara, was meant to mislead, but the scratches, on the desk, on the staircase, matched the rose's stem. A weapon she crafted herself. Her confession. It was the final note in the symphony of truth. Inspector Grayson, lingering by the door, nodded reluctantly. You've got a knack, Poirot. I was set on Reginald, but you saw the bigger picture. We'll take it from here. Beatrice will face the courts. Poirot's expression grew somber. Justice, it is necessary, but it does not heal. Lady Evelyn's death, it is a wound on this house, on all of you. Remember her not for her secrets, but for her strength, her love, however flawed. As the guests dispersed, their steps heavy with the weight of the truth, Poirot turned to Hastings. Mon ami, come. Let us walk the cliffs before we depart. The sea, it speaks of eternity. And we must return to the world. They stepped outside, the wind sharp and salty, the cliffs stark against the fading light. Poirot paused, gazing at the horizon. The human heart, Hastings. It is both fragile and fierce. We solve the crime, but the heart, it remains a mystery. That is why Hercule Poirot listens, not just to clues, but to the silences between. As they walked back to the manor, the shadows of the Gilded Mask ball seemed to fade. But the echo of Beatrice's confession lingered, a reminder of the cost of secrets kept too long. Poirot, his mission complete, adjusted his hat and stepped into the dusk, his little gray cells already turning to the next puzzle life would bring. Chapter 12. The Unseen Thread. The dawn broke over Ashford, the manor's terrace. The sea breeze sharp against his face, watching the waves crash against the Devonshire cliffs. The weight of the previous night's confrontation lingered, Beatrice's tearful confession echoing in his thoughts. Poirot joined him, his small figure immaculate despite the early hour, his green eyes scanning the horizon as if it held answers. Mon ami, Poirot said, his voice soft but firm. You are troubled. The case is solved, the killer confessed. Yet you feel, as I do, that something remains. Is it not so? Hastings turned, his brow furrowed. I don't know, Poirot. Beatrice admitted everything. The rose, the motive, the moment. But it feels too neat. The cloak, for instance. Why leave it in the servants' quarters? And that note. The rose blooms where shadows fall. It's so theatrical. Could someone else have been involved? Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of approval. Bravo, Hastings. You begin to think with the little gray cells. The confession. It is complete, yet it lacks depth. Beatrice. She is the hand that struck, but was she the mind that planned? We must revisit the clues, for there is an unseen thread that binds them. They returned to the drawing room where the remaining suspects, Reginald Ashford, Clara Ashford, Dr. Simon Haverford, and Major Ernest Whitlock, sat in subdued silence, their faces marked by the strain of the past days. Inspector Grayson, preparing to depart with Beatrice in custody, looked up as Poirot entered, his expression one of impatience. Poirot, the case is closed. The girl confessed. We're taking her to the station. What more do you want? Poirot raised a hand, his voice calm but commanding. Inspector, indulge me a moment longer. A confession. It is a beginning, not an end. There is a detail, a small inconsistency that troubles Hercule Poirot. The cloak. Why was it hidden so carelessly? The note. Why leave it at all? And the letter, burned yet partially preserved. These are not the acts of a lone killer, but of a design. Reginald, his eyes bloodshot, snapped. What are you saying, Poirot? Beatrice killed Mother. She admitted it. Are you suggesting she didn't act alone? Clara, her posture rigid, added, This is cruel, Mr. Poirot. We're grieving. Let it end. Poirot's gaze swept the room, noting every reaction. Madame, grief does not obscure truth. Let everything. Evelyn's past, the child, my silence. Major Whitlock, his voice gruff, interjected. This is nonsense. Beatrice was desperate, cornered. She acted alone. You're chasing shadows, Poirot. Poirot's eyes narrowed, focusing on Whitlock. Shadows, Major? The note speaks of shadows, and you are a man who moves with purpose. Your alibi is solid, bridge with the Carvers. But you were quick to dismiss the cloak, the note, as theatrics. Why? Whitlock's jaw tightened. Because they're distractions. The girl confessed. Focus on her. Poirot stepped closer, his voice low and piercing. No, Major. The cloak was placed to mislead, but not by Beatrice. She was the instrument, not the architect. The note, the burned letter. They point to a mind that manipulates, that orchestrates. You knew Lady Evelyn's secret, did you not? A military man with connections. Perhaps you learned of her child, her shame, and saw an opportunity. Whitlock's face reddened. That's absurd. I was her friend, nothing more. Poirot turned to the group, his tone relentless. The letter threatening to expose Lady Evelyn's past. It was not Beatrice's alone. She received it, yes, but someone else wrote it, sent it, knowing it would push her to act. Someone who stood to gain from her ruin, from the chaos of this house. Major Whitlock, you were in debt to Lady Evelyn. A loan, never repaid, mentioned in her journal. She threatened to expose your financial ruin unless you settled it. You used Beatrice, her fear, her secret, to eliminate that threat. Whitlock leapt to his feet, his voice booming. Lies!
I played cards all night. You have no proof. Poirot held up the journal, opened to a page. Lady Evelyn wrote of a military debt and a warning to E.W. You, Major. You sent the letter, knowing Beatrice's identity as her daughter. You planted the cloak, smeared with blood, to ensure suspicion fell elsewhere. The note. It was your flourish, a taunt to mask your role. Clara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Ernest? You used Beatrice? Reginald's voice was a whisper. My God. You manipulated her knowing what it would do. Whitlock's face contorted, his composure cracking. I didn't kill her. I only wanted to protect myself. Evelyn was going to ruin me. I sent the letter, yes, to scare her, but Beatrice, she acted on her own. Poirot's smile was cold. No, Major. You knew her fragility, her fear of exposure. You lit the spark, and she struck the flame. You are at the second revelation, settling like dust. The manor's shadows seemed to lift, but the scars of betrayal remained, etched into the hearts of those left behind. Chapter 13. The Tangled Web. The revelation of Major Ernest Whitlock's role in orchestrating Lady Evelyn Ashford's murder had left Ashford Manor in a state of stunned disbelief. The drawing room, where the remaining suspects, Reginald Ashford, Clara Ashford, and Dr. Simon Haverford, sat, seemed to pulse with the aftershock of truth. Beatrice Lyle, the confessed killer, had been manipulated by Whitlock's cunning, her desperation weaponized to protect his own interests. The gilded rose, the stopped clock, the cryptic note, all had been threads in a web spun by a mind as calculating as it was ruthless. Hercule Poirot stood by the window, the late afternoon light casting his small, immaculate figure in sharp relief against the Devonshire cliffs beyond. His green eyes, usually so piercing, held a trace of melancholy, as if the weight of human frailty pressed upon him. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated near the fireplace, clutched his notebook, his mind reeling from the complexity of the case. The arrest of Whitlock, now being questioned by Inspector Grayson in the Manor's parlor, had clarified much, but Poirot's restless pacing suggested there was still a knot to untangle. Mon ami, Poirot said, turning to Hastings. The web is intricate, yes, but not complete. Major Whitlock. He sent the letter, he planted the cloak, he stirred Beatrice's fear. Yet there is a detail, a small inconsistency that troubles Hercule Poirot. The journal. It speaks of a military debt and E.W., but also of a shadowed ally. Who is this ally? And why does the journal not name them? Hastings frowned, flipping through his notes. You think there's someone else involved? Beatrice confessed to the act, and Whitlock to the manipulation. Could there be a third party? Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of deep thought. Précisément, Hastings. The human heart, it is a labyrinth, and in this case the paths converge in unexpected ways. The shadowed ally. It suggests another who knew of Lady Evelyn's secret, who perhaps aided Whitlock or Beatrice, knowingly or not. We must return to the clues, for they whisper what the suspects conceal. He gathered the remaining guests, their faces drawn with exhaustion and dread. Inspector Grayson, returning from the parlor, joined them, his expression a mix of frustration and curiosity. Poirot, he said, Whitlock sticking to his story. He sent the letter, pushed Beatrice, but swears he did. But crucial to the truth, Reginald, his voice raw, leaned forward. Another accomplice? My God, Poirot, how deep does this go? Mother's dead. Beatrice is in custody.
Whitlock's confessed to scheming. Who else could be involved? Clara, her eyes cold, added, "You're chasing ghosts, mister." Poirot. Beatrice killed her. Whitlock planned it. Let us grieve in peace, Dr. Haverford. His gaunt face ashen shook his head. I've told you everything. Evelyn's past, the child, my silence. I had no part in this, none. Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. Mesdames et messieurs, let us revisit the night of the Gilded Mask ball. At 9:30 p.m., Dr. Haverford spoke with Lady Evelyn near the staircase. At 9:42, her clock stopped, suggesting someone was in her room. At 9:45, she was found dead, the gilded rose on her chest. The letter, the note, the cloak, all point to Beatrice and Whitlock. But the journal's shadowed ally. It suggests another who knew of the child, who perhaps provided the letter's details to Whitlock. He turned to Clara, his voice gentle but probing. Madame Ashford, you argued with Lady Evelyn 2 days before the ball about rumors of her past. You denied spreading them, yet the earring, yours, stolen by Beatrice, was found in her room. Did you know of the child? Did you share this with anyone? Clara's face paled, her hands clenching. I told you, I didn't spread those rumors. Evelyn accused me, but I knew nothing of her child until Haverford's confession. The earring was an accident. I lost it during our argument. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And yet, madame, you were quick to point to Dr. Haverford's argument with Lady Evelyn to deflect suspicion. Why? Clara's voice trembled. I was protecting myself. I saw them arguing, yes, but I didn't know what it was about. I thought it might clear me if you looked at him. Poirot turned to Haverford. Doctor, you knew of the child, Beatrice, since your youth with Lady Evelyn. Did you ever speak of it, even in passing, to another? Haverford's hands shook, his glasses slipping. Never. I swore to keep her secret. Only Evelyn and I knew, until that letter surfaced. I thought it was Whitlock's doing, but I had no proof. Poirot's gaze shifted to Reginald, who sat hunched, his eyes haunted. Monsieur Ashford, you searched the library for a letter, not a cigar. Did you know of your mother's past, of Beatrice's true identity, the key? She moves unseen, unnoticed. Grayson frowned. Elsie? She's just a girl, barely 20. She's been cooperative, found the key for you. Poirot's smile was faint. Précisément. Too cooperative, perhaps. Let us speak with her. Elsie was summoned, her young face pale, her hands twisting in her apron. Mr. Poirot, sir, I've told you all I know, the key, the note. I didn't see anything else. Poirot's voice was gentle. Mademoiselle Elsie, you knew Lady Evelyn's habits, her journal, her room. Did you ever overhear her speak of a child, a secret? Elsie's eyes widened, her voice trembling. I didn't mean to listen, sir, but I heard her talking to Major Whitlock weeks ago in the library. She mentioned a child, said it was a burden she'd carried too long. I told no one, I swear, except I mentioned it to Cook in passing. I didn't think it mattered. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And Cook, she speaks freely, yes. To others in the village, perhaps. To Major Whitlock. Elsie nodded, tears welling. Cook's got a loose tongue. She might have told someone.
"Oh, sir, did I cause this?" Poirot's expression softened. "Non, mademoiselle. You were a thread, not the weaver. Major Whitlock used this gossip, shaped it into a letter to push Beatrice to act. The shadowed ally was not a conspirator, but a careless voice amplifying a secret." The room exhaled, the final piece falling into place. The tangled web, spun by Whitlock's cunning and Beatrice's desperation, had ensnared an innocent maid's words, leading to murder. Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice low. "Mon ami, the truth, it is never simple. A whisper, a letter, a rose, they weave a tragedy. But now the web is untangled." The manor shadows seemed to recede, but the scars of betrayal lingered, a reminder of the fragile threads that bind human hearts. Chapter 14. The Final Knot. The revelation of Elsie's unwitting role in the tragedy of Lady Evelyn Ashford's murder had cast a somber hush over Ashford Manor. The drawing room, bathed in the pale light of a late afternoon sun, felt like a stage where the final act of a grim drama was nearing its close. The remaining suspects, Reginald Ashford, Clara Ashford, and Dr. Simon Haverford, sat in stunned silence, their faces etched with the exhaustion of truths laid bare. Major Ernest Whitlock and Beatrice Lyle, now a journal. The gilded rose, the stopped clock, and the blood-stained cloak had all played their parts. Yet a faint shadow lingered, a final knot in the intricate web of the crime. "Mon ami," Poirot said, turning to Hastings, his voice low but resonant, "we have found the hand that struck, the mind that schemed, and the whisper that ignited. Yet the heart of this tragedy, it beats still. There is one detail, one small inconsistency that demands our attention. The letter, the one that set all this in motion. Its words, 'Debt repaid, shadows fall,' were burned, yet partially preserved. Why?" Hastings frowned, his mind retracing the clues. "You think there's more to the letter?" Whitlock admitted to writing it, to push Beatrice. Elsie's gossip gave him the details about the child. What else could there be? Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of deep contemplation. "Précisément, Hastings. The letter was the spark, but its survival, even in fragments, is curious. Why burn it, yet leave a note echoing its words? It is as if the killer, or someone, wished to ensure we found it, to point us toward a truth, or perhaps a lie." He turned to the group, his presence commanding their attention despite their weariness. "Mesdames et messieurs, the case of Lady Evelyn's murder is nearly closed, but there is one final question. The letter that threatened to expose her secret child. Major Whitlock claimed authorship, yet its tone, its elegance, it does not match his blunt nature. I ask you now, did any of you know of this letter before it arrived, or suspect its true source?" Reginald, his face drawn, shook his head. "I told you, Poirot, Mother mentioned a threatening letter, but I never saw it. I thought it was about my debts, not..." "Beatrice." Clara, her voice steady but cold, added, "Evelyn accused me of spreading rumors, but I knew nothing of any letter until you found the fragment. If Whitlock wrote it, that's his crime, not mine." Dr. Haverford, his gaunt frame slumped, removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "I swore I never spoke of her child, except to Evelyn herself. Whitlock must have gotten the details from Elsie, as you said. I had no part in it. Poirot's gaze lingered on Haverford, his eyes narrowing. Doctor, you are a man of precision, a man of letters. Lady Evelyn trusted you with her deepest secret, her child Beatrice. Yet you were quick to deny knowledge of the letter, even when she you, not as a conspirator, but as a source. The letter's elegance, its phrasing, it bears the mark of a cultured mind, not Whitlock's. Did you write it? Perhaps not to threaten, but to warn Evelyn of whispers in the village. Haverford's face crumpled, tears welling. I didn't mean for this to happen. I wrote a letter, yes, not to threaten, but to urge her to be careful. The village was talking. Elsie's gossip had spread. I wanted her to know, to protect herself. I burned it after our talk at 9:30, but someone must have retrieved it, used it. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Someone, we. Major Whitlock. He found the ashes, pieced together the words, and crafted a new letter, amplifying the threat to push Beatrice to act. You, Doctor, were the unwitting spark, your loyalty twisted into a weapon. Clara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Simon, you wrote it? You caused all this. Haverford sobbed, his voice barely audible. I didn't know. I only wanted to protect her. I never thought it would lead to murder. Reginald stood, his voice shaking with anger. You fool, Haverford! Your letter drove Beatrice to madness, gave Whitlock his chance. Mother's blood is on your hands too. Poirot raised a hand, his voice calm but firm. No, Monsieur Ashford. The guilt, it is shared. But the crime belongs to Beatrice and Whitlock. Dr. Haverford's error was one of judgment, not intent. The letter, it was meant to shield, not to wound. The true knot is this: a secret, whispered carelessly, became a blade in the hands of those who sought power or revenge. Inspector Grayson, who had been listening intently, shook his head. So Haverford's letter started it all, but Whitlock and Beatrice are the ones we're charging. Anything else, Poirot? Poirot nodded, his expression somber. One final act, Inspector. The note. The rose blooms where shadows fall. It was Whitlock's flourish, echoing Haverford's words to tie the crime to Beatrice. The final knot is untied. The truth is complete. As the guests absorbed the weight of Haverford's confession, Poirot turned to Hastings. Mon ami, the human heart, it seeks to protect, but in its shadows it can destroy. Dr. Haverford's loyalty, Elsie's gossip, Whitlock's greed, Beatrice's fear. They wove a tragedy. The little gray cells, they see the pattern, but they cannot undo the pain. The manor's silence deepened. Arrests of Beatrice Lyle and Major Ernest Whitlock, coupled with Dr. Simon Haverford's unintended role in sparking the tragedy, had brought the mystery of Lady Evelyn Ashford's murder to a close. Yet the scars of betrayal lingered, etched into the hearts of those left behind. Hercule Poirot stood on the manor's terrace, his small, immaculate figure framed against the fading light, his green eyes fixed on the restless sea below. The journal, the gilded rose, the stopped clock, the blood-stained cloak, all had played their parts in unraveling a crime woven from secrets and desperation. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing beside him, felt a profound sense of closure, though the case's emotional toll tempered his usual admiration for Poirot's genius. Mon ami, Poirot said,
his voice soft but resonant. The case is solved, the truth laid bare. Yet the heart, it does not rest so easily. Lady Evelyn's death, it was a tragedy of human frailty. Love twisted into fear, loyalty into betrayal. The little gray cells, they triumph, but they cannot erase the sorrow. Hastings nodded, his gaze drifting to the manor's windows, where the remaining guests, Reginald, Clara, and Haverford, prepared to face a future altered by loss. It's a grim business, Poirot. Beatrice, driven by shame. Whitlock, by greed. Haverford, by a misguided attempt to protect. And poor Elsie, caught up in it all by a careless word. How do they move on from this? Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile touching his lips. They move on, Hastings, as all must, by facing the truth, however painful. Reginald will inherit a legacy stained by scandal, but he has strength. Clara, she will find her place, free of Lady Evelyn's shadow. Haverford, he will carry his guilt, but it will teach him caution. And Elsie, she will learn the power of words. Life, it continues, even in the wake of death. Inside, the drawing room was nearly empty, its grandeur dimmed by the absence of its former mistress. Reginald stood by the fireplace, staring into the cold grate, his face a mask of grief and resolve. Clara, packing her belongings in preparation to leave the manor, moved with a quiet determination, as if shedding the weight of her mother-in-law's dominance. Dr. Haverford, his gaunt frame slumped in a chair, clutched a photograph of Lady Evelyn from years past, his eyes red with unshed tears. Inspector Grayson approached Poirot and Hastings on the terrace, his usual gruffness softened by respect. "You've done it again, Poirot," he said, tipping his hat. "Whitlock's confessed to writing the threatening letter. Ensure that Mademoiselle Lyle and Major Whitlock face justice, but with understanding. Their crimes, they were born of human weakness, not malice alone." Grayson nodded, then turned to his constables who were preparing to depart with the prisoners. The sound of their footsteps faded, leaving the manor in a profound stillness. Poirot adjusted his hat, his movements precise, and gestured to Hastings. "Come, mon ami. The train to London awaits, and Hercule Poirot, he does not linger where his work is done." As they walked toward the manor's gates, Hastings glanced back at the imposing facade, its windows glinting like eyes in the twilight. "Do you ever tire of it, Poirot? The lies, the betrayals, the pain we uncover?" Poirot paused, his gaze distant. "Tire? No, Hastings. The human heart, it is a puzzle, ever-changing, ever-challenging. To seek order in its chaos, to bring light to its shadows, that is my purpose. But I confess, there are moments when the heart's darkness weighs heavy. Yet we continue, for to stop is to surrender to disorder." They reached the gates where a car waited to take them to the station. The cliffs loomed behind, the sea a restless murmur, as if whispering farewell to the tragedy that had unfolded. Poirot climbed into the car, his posture impeccable, his mind already turning to the next mystery life would present. Hastings, settling beside him, felt a quiet pride. "You're right, Poirot. The truth, it's worth it, no matter the cost. But I'll be glad to leave this place behind." Poirot's smile was warm, almost wistful. "As will I, mon ami. But the memory of Ashford Manor, it will linger, a reminder that even in the grandest halls, the smallest secrets can bloom into tragedy." The car pulled away, the manor fading into the dusk, its shadows receding but never fully gone. The Gilded Mask ball had ended, its masks stripped away, and Hercule Poirot, the master of order, moved on to face the next challenge, his little gray cells ever vigilant in the pursuit of truth.